Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Jon. He's the CEO of Wolfram Blockchain Labs, where he currently coordinates the decentralized projects that connects the Wolfram Technology ecosystem to different other ecosystems. Previously, before this, he was working on projects under the direction of the Wolfram Research CEO, Stephen Wolfram, and before that, he was a team member who worked on monetization strategies for the company. He has a background in economics and computational neurosciences and enjoys cycling in his spare time. Thanks for joining the show, Jon.
Thanks for having me, David. It's exciting to be here.
So I was just taking a look at, yeah, absolutely. And I was just taking a look at your profile, and I noticed that across all of your roles, you've been affiliated in some way with Wolfram for at least the past decade. Can you tell me what the company's been doing that has made it so interesting for you to stay over 10 years?
Sure. So one, I think, big factor is that you get to work really closely with Stephen Wolfram. And it's really exciting because here's somebody who's been in technology, like from the foundations of technology. Like, I think he has this quote from his mother, who was a professor at Oxford, that I guess around like 5 or 6 that he had gone through looking through dinosaurs. And so he needed like a new project, and that new project ended up being like computers. So, and like that, you combine that with someone who saves like relentlessly, like basically every scrap of paper that he's touched since maybe like 6 or 7. And so I think he even has like an archive of a lot of this stuff on his site, StephenWolfram.com. So it's kind of like, you'll be in conversations and he'll be like, oh, I remember talking to this person, or like this person went to my elementary school, and we'll pull out some memento or something like from this. So it's kind of like, I think life, like we're realizing going through like this kind of period of time now, that like life is a lot about the experiences that you're able to collect, like with your families, friends, work, and everything else. So it's incredibly exciting to be around like a dynamic figure. And then I think for someone like me, I have grown kind of into this person who, like, I can try to do both like the vision aspects of things, like, and then also like the hard, like day-to-day execution tasks as well. So it's interesting to be around like a dynamic figure that has like the historical understanding of technology and science just in general. And then like be able to see like, here's how we've come up with something, and now we're going to go out and execute and build this. And that's really like a phenomenal learning experience that I'd say that most people across the board, at any level of education or any company, they really don't get to see. So it's like, of course.
Can you dive deeper in that and tell me what are some of the things you've learned from being in close proximity to him?
Sure. So like one thing is like how I think there's this book by Ralph Ellison called The Invisible Man. It's actually about like African-American experience in the US. And it's this fabulous book that has all these allusions to things just in the world and during the time period. It's one that you can go back and read again and again. And it's one of these things where Ellison talks about life and history kind of being a boomerang in a way. And it's like it comes back, but not quite in the same spot. So it's something I think that we see in technology all the time, that we see now with things that are incredibly popular, like say Instacart or DoorDash, where it's like, hey, we saw this, 2 decades ago with Webvan that just failed spectacularly. So, and this constant movement of things kind of being more and more computational oriented. And Stephen talks about that in a way that in the end we'll have like everything made out of computers. So it's kind of like, in order to think about things maybe from a product standpoint in technology, you're constantly looking at the future and maybe bringing back what Stephen will call like artifacts from the future. And it's a matter of trying to describe to people, here's this thing that's new to them that they don't understand like how to use, that's from this new time period that will become ubiquitous. but bringing it to them at the right time where it becomes something that they'll be interested in and something that they'll be able to use. Like, the Apple Watches that we have now, Apple was able to come out with them at the right time, or like the smartphones that we have, from Apple, whatever products. Apple is outstanding at being able to do that. And I think that's this other training when it comes to software and computation that we've also been able to do and have an opportunity to kind of learn from and then get better at those sort of aspects, because you have to take that stuff from the future and then kind of chop it down into what you can accomplish right now and accomplish in stages and bring it out at the right time, and then keep being able to fund and push up the stair toward something spectacular that you may have seen as this vision of this thing from the future, but people may not be willing to accept that if you bring it to them right now. Or there may be various sort of underlying foundational pieces of technology that you don't have at the right price or aren't, available or whatever. I think I've also heard this great quote from somebody else. Should probably look it up and see where it is, but the future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. Right? That a lot of these things, we know where it will be in the future at some point of time, and you may be able to recognize that, but getting the feel from, again, things in the past and adoption and how people behave to figure out, how to make that available, when to make it available, in what form, so that you can have this step. Again, to take Apple as an example, coming out with the iPod and then knowing the right time to come out with the iPhone and absorb, the phone and the iPod and, the computer. And that's really hard to do.
So in your conversations with Stephen, how does he justify, or how does he explain his journey in building a computational platform as the means to bring the future to either more people or to a next level?
So I think my best way of describing it right now, and I'm sure there's some rote answer, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to have to answer how I'm going to answer.
That's fine.
It's almost like looking at it like trying to democratize technology and democratize computational tools. So I guess the way to think about it is when Mathematica came out in 1988. So Wolfram was founded in 87. Mathematica came out in 1988. It was taking all of these, it's the same kind of journey over the past 3.5 decades of trying to take this content that's out there in the world, this knowledge that's out there in the world, and making it accessible through a language. And that language is Wolfram language. And so it's kind of taking the algorithms that are available, taking the data and making it computable, and making it so that machines can understand and use this data. We call it computable data, making that available, and expanding this as this tool that you could use across a bunch of different disciplines. So kind of in the future, thinking about, a computational economics or computational sociology or computational English, or all of these fields across the board, to take advantage of, in many ways, how people are progressing, where it's now we are augmenting ourselves already with earbuds, right? So we have our auditory experiences augmented. We have tactile, with our watches that can tell us, oh, someone's calling, or we'll get to the point where, we'll relearn Morse code so that we can discreetly know who's calling us. We can look at our smartphones that, people are walking across the street looking at their smartphones. We're going to go to glasses, to maybe contacts, to maybe implants. We're going to be cyborgs. And it sounds crazy. And people were saying this 20 years ago, and everybody would laugh because it'd be oh, that's ridiculous, right? But now it's yeah, probably that's going to happen. So it's I think a lot of those things are, again, this concept of these artifacts, from the future and knowing when's the right time and when it's going to be distributed and everything else. And I think that that's kind of what Stephen is working on from a software perspective, is thinking about, how to make a language that's really a knowledge-based programming language so that people can do things across all of these different fields, and they don't have to look through piles and piles of documentation. It's just easy to provide some input to the function and then use that output in another function and have it be seamless across lots of different fields, where like now people are stuck using libraries or try to do data wrangling to handle those things. Instead, it just becomes a seamless experience. And so you can even go further than that and see like what we've done and experimented with Wolfram Alpha in terms of, interacting with natural language and going from natural language. So I don't even have to teach you anything. So it's just you kind of interacting with a computer, where we have made this computational intelligence possible, and maybe in a way have bridged this gap between humanity and computers by teaching computers, right? And so it's like, to harness this computational intelligence now, it will gradually become so easy. It's just talking, in natural language to this computer, and all of this computational intelligence has gone so far that the computer just can understand you at this very high level and do stuff for you. So that's kind of how I would describe this kind of journey. I don't know if it would be right. I don't know if it's how Stephen would describe it, but that's kind of like my understanding of that process at this point, giving it on the fly on this particular day.
So you lead the division that tackles the development and research of blockchain as it relates to Wolfram. Would you say your vision is what you just shared, or is there a specific part of the vision that's more important to you as it relates to leading the blockchain research?
So what I would say is it's very similar. Like, you can kind of see where in many ways we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to take, this new form of computation, this new encapsulation of data about the world in forms of transactions and smart contracts and other things that are going on like in this blockchain, in these decentralized kind of space, of which there are all of these kind of cooperatives in a way. Like, so you can kind of think of like Bitcoin as a community, Cardano as a community, Tezos as a community, Arc as a community, all of these communities that have kind of figured out their specialties in different ways and brought all of these people to run nodes, and then they participate in transactions in a way. And they've created their own system of laws, their own governance, everything else, like digital communities in a way. Digital communities that kind of advanced from like, the bulletin boards way back in the day. I never actually used them. I feel like guilty that I had access to like a Commodore 64, and like people would like be on the internet and like everything. So I never actually posted on a bulletin board. I did have beg to get access to, my dad is a former professor at the University of Iowa, so he had access to the internet through the University of Iowa and had like the terminals, so I could get access. And I remember I crashed some mainframe because I ran some program that didn't terminate or something like that. They called me up. But
how old were you then?
I had to have been like in high school, where I was doing some like,
oh wow, that's
yeah,
cool.
Like I wish I really would have stayed like more detailed with programming, because I did programming like when I was 7 and 8. Like they had summer computer. I was a really nerd. I basically had swimming, gymnastics, soccer, and computer lessons. Like
one of these is not like the other.
Right. Like I did all sorts of stuff. But yeah, so like, you had these ways of interacting with communities, and like you could see that, like, in fact, I love the show Halt and Catch Fire, because they like go back and like they talk about these things. But like Mutiny in Halt and Catch Fires like does a good job of really talking about the online communities. Well, blockchains are like a new incantation of those communities, of people being able to do transactions in their own currency that's given value by their community and their community participation, which is amazing in a way. So you can kind of think about like what we're doing is thinking about the knowledge that's created in those communities and trying to make that knowledge computational and available, again, like from that perspective, in the outside world of those communities in one way, and being able to interact through Wolfram language, reading information from those communities and writing information and transactions and NFTs, which I'm going to promote, on those as forms of transactions, on those blockchains. Again, if you're thinking about it as a community, like receiving information and giving information to those communities, and then also computational facts that, hey, we've been since 2004 when we started Wolfram Alpha as a project, as a skunkworks project, and then released it out to the world in 2009. We've been making data computable that's about the world, and it turns out that this was the authoritative data. We weren't scraping it, but authoritative data. And this is precisely what you need for the contracts that run in these communities on chain, that they need this information that's in the world to do these contracts amongst these community members in these communities, these kind of cooperatives where they have their own transactions, they have their own laws, they have their own currency, they have their own governance. It's really kind of interesting and unique to just think about it from kind of all of these different disciplines, legal, social science, and computer science, that these things are going on, that they're developing, and that they're kind of splitting off in a way and developing their own kind of personalities. And you can kind of witness this as an outside observer on social media, in particular, like on Twitter, where they all kind of interact, and then on their own forums and on Reddit too, like different areas where they kind of interact and go back and forth with each other. So in that kind of way of thinking, we're trying to do something very similar to Wolfram Research and take that data and make it available through Wolfram language and be able to interact with that community. And then also taking all of these things that we've done for the past, 3.5 decades with all of this knowledge, both algorithmic and computable data, and provide that back to enable these different transactions that people want to do on these different chains, but more importantly, like within these different communities. So that's kind of like the first, like maybe 2 things that we've really done. We've worked on integrating these communities into Wolfram language, both reading and writing. And then the second thing is being able to provide information from Wolfram back to these communities, in particular to handle, the operational kind of clauses within smart contracts, so to make that stuff possible. So it's kind of like, from that standpoint, it's kind of a corner of, the world that's also kind of representative of the world that maybe for us who are kind of immersed in this space hope to, take over more of the world so that more of the world comes in, or it eats more of the world. I don't know, whichever way, but like, so that kind of works in that kind of way. So those are like the 2 like areas. And then, as I said, like we're doing analytics and things building on top of this stuff that we've done, analytics, so that people can, like any other analytics in business or life, so that people kind of know what's going on and can summarize and have a better understanding. And then education about things in general, because if you kind of look at it like Andreessen talks about software eating the world, and like blockchain people would want to say that well, decentralized systems are going to eat both the software world and just the organizations that we have in general in the world, so that everybody participates in these cooperatives. That like we're trying to enable that in all of these different ways. So it's kind of like cutting this area of the world that's nascent, that's growing, and hoping that the way that we describe this, the way that we interact, is useful for and adds value for everyone. Hopefully, that's kind of how I would look at it.
You mentioned a couple of networks that are involved, like the networks of each of the individual crypto currencies, as well as the crypto platforms and smart contracts. How is it that you were able to find your first integration partner to work with Wolfram to, I guess, have an actual deliverable from your research lab?
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard. And I was talking about that with a colleague of mine on another project today. Because it's really hard when you kind of are kind of looking. I don't have it here, unfortunately. Do I have my notes here? I'm reading this marketing book, so I thought that I was.
Okay, which one? What's the name of it?
It's like it is a marketing book for a class. I could get it, but so it's like I can't remember the authors of it, but it's like a principles of marketing book.
Okay.
And so I started reading through it because I've never taken a marketing class. And so I was like, I'm not going to read, like I've read enough of the internet, which is great, but also like, sometimes like deeply disappointing. So I was like, I'm just going to teach myself marketing by just reading a whole textbook. Which is also like I feel like a strength of Wolfram, in that like you're around all these physicists all the time, and there's like this STEM hierarchy where like physicists or mathematicians are kind of at the top, right? And then like lowly engineers are like way down here. So like it's kind of like there'll be plenty of meetings where I'm just like, what are you even talking about? Like, I don't even understand. Like, I don't even understand what it is you're talking about, and I'm just trying to like either look it up or like hold on to like some visualization of what's going on. But like, if like I can like be at the outer edges of physics conversations and gradually like hold on for dear life to like not feel completely lost, like I'll take my chances with reading a marketing book over like reading somebody's recap of some book and their own theories. I'll just start from scratch. So I've been doing that. I'm like now on chapter 8 out of I think 21 chapters or something, which I'm feeling pretty good. But so to go back to the original question about like solving that first customer, it's like you really have to think about your go-to-market strategy, which is all this jargon, which I really hate, especially like that's the sole thing from like engineering that I carry over, is a professor saying like, oh my gosh, jargon even between engineering disciplines is like ridiculous and silly. But like how you're going to initially, with some product that you kind of have as a vision, sell that, like create like value in this product to as niche population as possible, so that you can get like really good leads and have really tailored information to them, so that they know that you know what they're talking about and that you're going to try to bring as much value to them as you can. Like that, it starts to become that way. And it's funny because I was talking with this colleague and we had kind of like figured out this stuff by going through first principles, which is big at a company that's dominated by physicists. It's like, no, we're just going to do this all ourselves. You invent your own marketing, it was great in a way, but it took us a while. And it's like, wait a minute, you mean somebody just wrote this down and I could have read this and spent a day to like learn how to do this. So like you're looking at this go-to-marketing and you're like, go-to-market. And you're thinking like, how do I trim down these, to go back to what I was saying earlier, this broad vision, maybe this artifact from the future that I have. And I'm like, here. And people are like, I don't even understand what this does. How do you know, how do I don't want it, right? Like you're making me change everything I do. You're trying to take all of those like features and things that like you've conceptually maybe created in your mind, or maybe unfortunately like you've actually have the product or whatever. And you're trying to like come up with a really thin slice of people that you think you can provide incredible value to those people. And then you're going back to this and you're saying, okay, which are going to be the easiest to make and actualize to give people this value? And then I'll be able to describe this value to them in what, again, like some jargon, a value proposition, and also the strength that I have as a company to be able to do that. And all that sounds really easy as I describe it here, and I wish I could go back in time and be like, no, you know, this is what you need to do. But it's a struggle to do all those things. It's not easy. And I think one of the problems that when you look online and like you read on some, you know, you watch some video or like you read on some website, it's like, oh, you just do this and take 45 minutes. It's like, no, it's going to take you a long time. It's going to take you a long time to come up with those kind of ideas. And that's where like marketing, I'm seeing the value of like that research and that kind of feedback loop that you get from looking at, again, like this thing that you have, maybe a bundle of features and all this other stuff, and thinking about this niche group that's very small that you're trying to appeal to, that you're trying to provide value to, so that they see that value and they immediately want to pay you. Mm-hmm. So that's this process that you're working on. And so for us, it took a while because at first we were like, features. Right? And you're like, but who do you interact with? Who do you figure out? And so that's how you do it over time, is that you just limit things really aggressively. And then you look at your segments and you limit those really aggressively until you figure out these are people that we can talk to. These are also people, hopefully, that already recognize us. That either they recognize you as an individual and are like, hey, David, I know you're a really smart guy. I know that if you say you can do this, you can do this. So when you present this idea to me that I see that it has value, I'm just going to give you my money. So that's really what you're trying to do with this go-to-market strategy. At least that's how I've like gradually come to figure it out, between struggling at it myself, reading countless internet sites, watching videos from people, you know, explain how easy it is, or other people say that you'll wait a lifetime, you know, there is an extreme on, and then like reading through this stuff, I'm like, this is really what you're trying to like take your initial strategic vision and all these ideas and really just slice them down to this really thin segment that you really understand. You've come to understand through your research and everything else. You've interacted with them because you've taken this and you've been like, can you want to buy this? And lots of people will be like, no, I don't. I don't even know what to, do. And you aggressively change that and you keep coming back. Like Y Combinator has great videos, I think, about that as well. Like that's why you really can't take like a no as like you don't really necessarily get any valuable information. You just know that they don't want it and it may not be the time for them to buy it. But that's how you get to the point where you're going to find that first customer. And then that's what you keep trying to extend as you start to realize what works, because they will give you more information about how they want you to change this or want you to potentially add that. And they'll give you that feedback and that's why it's important to ask for money, because they will then keep giving you feedback because they're a real customer and they've seen the value in what you're bringing, and then you can go back to these kind of features, and you can kind of, is this, I won't show my other, let me see. I won't put the logo on there, but you'll be like that, or you'll be like this. And you'll start to get more feedback from them because they're actually paying, they're interacting with you, and you'll get better and better because in this thin segment that you selected, that there are other people that have that pain point, that have that, like, I guess other people have said, like, you want to sell aspirin, you don't want to sell vitamins. And what they mean by that is somebody's in really, acute or a chronic pain, and they want to give you money to take that away. And so it's, again, like going through those segments, looking through those features. That's what you keep trying to trim down, because the other thing, as you trim down those features, it's going to get less expensive for you to be able to produce it. So I guess that's kind of long-winded, but it kind of goes through the process that we went through of narrowing things down on both sides.
So specifically as it relates to the Wolfram Blockchain Labs, how does it, I imagine you have to learn a lot of background information across the entire crypto industry to be able to speak the certain language that the people you're trying to reach out to also understand and appreciate from people they want to buy from. Can you tell me about that journey?
Oh, it's like in crypto and blockchain, it's really, really hard. But I feel like that's where it's like another thing where being an engineer kind of helped in this way. Because one of the things that they tell you while you're taking classes is, like, don't worry about this part. Like, literally, they tell you all the time, that's just a black box. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what goes on inside it. Just think about the what you put into it, and think about what you get out of it. That's it. Like, don't do any other, because the way, and you think about it in a way, and it's like so many disciplines. You learn, from a very high level, the state of the discipline right now. You don't learn economics, for instance. Well, most people don't, by going back and reading Adam Smith, right? Wealth of Nations. I hope I got the title right. Otherwise, that'd be embarrassing.
I believe it's correct.
Okay. So most people don't go by, like, reading that book and then go through history in terms of, like, Nobel Prize winning papers and other very influential papers to learn economics. Like, most people don't learn that way. They pick up a textbook, read the latest of how to learn it with the best ways of kind of learning that, and start from there. They don't invent their own economic theory and other stuff. Although that's an excellent way of, like, learning it in a stronger way. You don't always have time to do that. So in looking at it from, like, the book and going through it, it's kind of like that's how you approach blockchain or crypto. You have to really look at it from the top level, and just be satisfied with what you understand at week one, and kind of understand as much as you can at week one, and then go through and watch people and think about things and interact, and then try to go to level two and keep going further and further to the current state of things as you go through things in whatever ways that you want to do. If you wanted to look from a programming perspective, if you wanted to look at it from a legal perspective, if you wanted to look at it from social science and the transactional data that you see that's kind of revealed, again, like in these public cooperatives, any of those things, it's kind of like you have to start at this high level and then keep peeling things back to go through. It's very hard. And certainly there are lots of people who can do it. It's just not the way I approached it, who will just go like from one side just completely down to, like, looking at commits or something. Like, hey, if you can do that, I mean, some people who can do that, that's great. That's not how I approached it. I approached it from like a very high level, and then gradually, like you can do through anything else. Like you can read people's white papers. You can look at Wikipedia. Like after you have this, first and maybe second level, you can look at people's manifestos in many ways directly. And because these different cooperatives and communities live kind of online, or have lived online, you can go back in time and like look at the development of how people have thought about various things, which is pretty fascinating in and of itself. Like we opened this conversation with bulletin board systems. There was an email list for cypherpunks that was incredibly influential, where Satoshi Nakamoto talked about Bitcoin. And you can go back and look, and there are sites that have like every public email that Nakamoto provided. So you can and it's open and available to everybody out there, which if you compare that to like Adam Smith, I don't know how much of his papers and his thinking was available beyond his, the stuff that he published. Like this is like phenomenal in a way.
Right.
You can see the records, just like you can see the records now of a lot of these cooperatives that are built on blockchains grow over time. You can see the decisions, you can see all these things and like learn from them. So you can get those like introductory classes, I would say, and introductory information, of which we're also, here's a plug, we're coming out with our own course that has a lot of this information across the board, from the economics, structure, legal, and also the computational idea, because we have information in all of these areas and have experts in all of these areas. So it's kind of like you want to build that, and then you want to keep moving further down. And it's great in this area because a lot of these people's manifestos are out there. Like, this is how I want to change the world. This is what I want to happen. You don't get it, or this is how it needs to be. And you can see the progression over time from very concentrated community and how they need to evangelize and convince other people to join in. And you can see that economic activity because it exists as records on these chains themselves. So it's pretty cool. So that's how I would say go about doing it.
Are you ever concerned with information overload? Because at some point, for you as a CEO, you need to be able to make connections and partnerships with a lot of other crypto communities, but your time is limited, so you don't have the time to study deeply into every project. And there are a lot of crypto projects out there nowadays. Like, I feel like there's significantly more than any reasonable human can consume, even if you study crypto from sunrise to sunset every day. There's just too much information.
Yeah, and
how do you handle that?
It's really difficult because, like, part of being like an executive, or even like in any position, because if you are an executive or CEO or leader, it's that you still have other people to respond to. At the very least, you have customers who are going to dictate kind of an arbiter in a way, like the economic marketplace, right? Like, whether they want what you have, if you want to be in some way like your ideas, like that's a little bit depressing sometimes, but that's an ultimate kind of marketplace in a way. So everybody has like someone that they have to interact with, and so from that standpoint, you have to think about answering to those people, and also your colleagues that you interact with, and that you make some decisions about, like the different areas that you divide into, like maybe being a CEO. And it's interesting because I've just kind of written out this thing where I was thinking about what are all of these areas that I would need to think about. Like, that's why I'm like reading this marketing book, and like to gain a new perspective both on the jargon and then the things that we've already done, where we maybe try to do them from first principles and work out decision trees, and then see how the discipline itself in the state that it is in would do with things, and then like, walk through that. And maybe it's become easier because it's like, hey, I've tried to do all these things. So one of the things that I've tried to do is, unfortunately, try to divide these things up into this decision is kind of like this strategy-oriented decision. And of this strategy, kind of, I feel like in my view, and certainly other people have their views, marketing kind of fits within this strategy because it provides this feedback to, is this mission and objectives, are they feasible given how people are out there and what they want? Like, because you may say, they want something spectacular that you've kind of either hopefully not physically built, but built in your mind. And they may say that once you start to we just don't want that. And then you have to rethink your objectives and strategy and go back to the top because it's going to be informed there. So thinking about that. And so that's kind of this strategy position. That's this, maybe this marketing position. Then if you're in technology, you're thinking about engineering. In other areas, it could be that you have other people who are actually executing this particular vision. You have this product where you're thinking about, part of this strategy where marketing, you have product where you're thinking about, okay, well, how do I design these? How do I use these different jargons in words in marketing to differentiate what I have in the marketplace? How am I making those decisions there? And I've started thinking about how I divide those kind of thought processes up, and how because I'm obsessive about writing things down because it helps me remember things. That's why I was referencing, maybe I have some notes and I could show you these notes when I was talking about marketing, because I find it it's a hack for me because it helps me remember what I've read. And then I try to summarize into either Wolfram notebooks about here's how I've gone about doing this process, or for myself even, here's the things that I felt like I've learned, and here's how I'm going to summarize this stuff. Here's a good, this is a box that's about this, and it's maybe since June, just notes, just handwritten notes. I'm going to pull it out just in case anyone thinks that I'm here's just handwritten notes that I'll do from when I'm talking, on Zoom with folks. I'll take handwritten notes. It's a good hack. Helps me remember it. And then when I write it, I'll write it out in a notebook. I do at Wolfram, we do weekly reports. I'll do reports on meetings if there's something really that I need to remember. And then I have a pile of discarded notes over here. I'm not going to show it because it's embarrassing. But when I take something and I've transferred it to a Wolfram notebook, I just crumple up the paper so I'm not going back through and it doesn't, these are the things where I'm oh, I thought of this idea. This is also something that Stephen has this great blog post where he's talking about all the things he does as a CEO. It's really good. He has a treadmill desk before there were treadmill desks, and he has a file cabinet for white pieces of paper like this that are notes. And I did that way before I knew that was him, but I didn't find a way of storing it. And what he says is you don't really need a complicated way of storing it. You just put it in a box. And that box will roughly be in date order with the earliest stuff at the top. And then if you need something because you're you can just go back and find it. So that's kind of what I do. So
do you digitize these notes? Do you scan them? Do you scan these notes into some digital platform?
But if you are if you're the CEO of a larger company, you can have people take those and scan them for you. So then you have them online and you can go through them slightly easier. I don't have that. I just have a box. But it's very useful. And he has this post where there's all these hacks about organizational and other things. So that's one hack where I've written out, here are these sections of what I feel like being the CEO is. And here's how I'm going to improve my capabilities in these areas as as I've segmented them out. And here's how I'm going to have my notebooks where even described to myself from reading, these books on various things, taking notes like maybe within those books or notes on paper and added them in my notebooks. This is my own book on how I want to operate, my own processes, everything else, where I've tried to, maybe I did it from first principles or maybe I did it from a book, but I tried to combine it into something that I can be like, how did I do? Oh, well, I'll just look for it. And so the benefit of that is I'm also able to share that information with my colleagues or other people and say, well, this is how I approached this particular problem. How do I know it? Like with some precision? Well, I wrote it down because I thought it would be important later. I wrote it down, on paper, or if it was really important, I took that from paper and I wrote it out, in my Wolfram notebook and then put it in any one of these file systems so that I have it and I can go back to it and I can look through this process and then I can share it with people, which makes it easier to scale because I can tell you with precision, this is how I went about doing something. You now need to take my notes and make your own playbook because, what works for me may not work for you. So when I go back to your question and look at like, how do I handle that as a CEO? One, it's dividing that stuff up and it becomes an ongoing process of taking using my own knowledge, having what I've interacted with Stephen, or when we had our conversation earlier that led to this, where you were like, I was like, hey, this is really good and this is really useful. I'm going to write this down. You're a useful person. Maybe I'll have other questions. I'm going to write these things down. I'm going to put it in this, notebook. I'm going to keep this for myself. And that way, my own kind of knowledge base, my own, brain in a way is divided into this way that's repeatable, that I can understand with precision and I can give to other people and kind of educating them in at least how I tackled it so then they can tackle those problems myself. And then it goes back to, this other part of being a CEO, which is this leadership, which becomes important. And that becomes an important way, an easier way to transmit, the leadership that I have over time. So then when I look at that's kind of this internal sphere of all the things that are going on and all the things the decisions that we're trying to do. That's how I hope to, continue to scale when people are approaching problems that I may have hit before. Well, we have this knowledge base that I started that I encourage other people to do so that we can transmit knowledge in this written form, which is critical and I thank goodness that I worked for a remote company for a decade because your writing skills become critical. And now this becomes, hey, I can look at this email about how I, dealt with this difficult situation or whatever. You have all these things. Whereas if you talk through them, you may gain some, interaction in that way, but you don't have this, rich playbook and rich set of emails and chats and other stuff that you can use to advance things. So how I look at, this domain area and how I handle that, well, you could see with doing all this, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that you have to do just in your business. And this is a much smaller business than companies that you've worked at that are their own city, where it's you're so busy probably internally in doing stuff. It's you don't really get a chance to look outside and look at things. So the way I've kind of approached that, one, conferences are great for that. Because here, there's something great. There's I think it was the CEO of Clever, where he was doing a Y Combinator talk on sales and saying that conferences are really useful for sales, but they're also useful because they break you literally out of that bubble where you're forced to interact with other people and they're going to teach you stuff that you're not going to know. And you're going to have to look up on your smartphone and be what is, and you're going to watch maybe a couple of the, I don't really go for the sessions all the time. I go to try to sell and network. But any one of those things, whether you're looking at the sessions or talking to people, you will learn what's going on. and what you need to advance on in order to interact with the people that make up your community. So the decentralized community that I'm talking about, it's that, you go to a conference, you're going to see the latest, you're going to interact, you're going to have to know by the time you get to the conference, the plane is convenient to catch up on all those things because you have limited connectivity on what you need to know. So that's something where you have to. The same is true of like sales calls, is that you better know what these companies are doing. You better go through, what they're interested in, what you can do to provide value for them. So I find like that's how I spend the most time looking and upgrading, is by these tasks that I have to accomplish when I'm wearing this specific hat. So for me, it's like sales and like marketing and looking at those things. And that kind of educates me while I'm fulfilling those tasks, but I make sure that I improve like the general structure and processes at the same time to gradually over time become more and more efficient. And then as I bring people in to do these different tasks, I can kind of show them a process of this is kind of how I've done this. And really, if I'm choosing them in a way, it's because I feel like they will be able to acclimate really quickly to this way that I found that's successful and mold it to, a way that they'll find that will be even more successful for them. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it in both like internally, how I handle things, and externally in this domain area. The other thing that I would say is incredibly useful are like aggregator sites that tell you, what's the latest that's going on, interacting with people that you already are working with that also will tell you, hey, this is new. Hey, they'll have ideas. They'll have other stuff. Twitter is great for learning like the latest stuff because it's people go back and forth with each other, and you have to make up your own mind in a way. Like, so I find it like really useful, and like they'll surface articles and everything else. So if you look at the aggregators, look at Twitter, and then there are different industry things that are particularly great in crypto that give you a lot of information. Like I'll just name drop some, like the Block, Bloomberg, CoinDesk, and then like TechMeme, like looking for the crypto articles that surface there. Again, looking at like Hacker News and seeing like the domain articles that surface on those aggregators have probably had particular importance. So that's how I kind of go through things, where when I feel like downtime or whatever, because I do try to take aggressive breaks. And so it allows you to work much longer if you're like, oh, like now I'm going to take a break. But like the break is, oh, I'm going to read this textbook, or, oh, I'm going to just read this industry stuff that I need to catch up on. It's not really it's not like you're still doing your work. So that's kind of how I try to look at things, where I'm looking at like this overall picture of what it is I'm supposed to be doing, drop it into like the things where I'm trying to accomplish in those processes and getting better at those processes. As I said earlier, we do like a weekly report that we have to send where we hit like, these are all the things that I did, which also helps hold accountable to how I spent the time between these things that I need to get done here and learning about what's going on in the broader kind of crypto blockchain sphere or whatever. I don't know, metaverse or whatever people are calling it these days.
Do you have a favorite book and or favorite conference?
That's hard because conferences have been like thrown into disarray.
That's fair.
I would say I like South by Southwest a lot, even though it's not a super like targeted like tech conference. It's hard because like the other thing that's hard about conferences is that there's this mix between really targeted conferences that you can go to where they're really industry people just directly, And then conferences where you get a broader selection of the community. So like a targeted conference, I would say is like something more like the way CES like used to be. I haven't been in a while, but like there'd be lots of tech companies that go because there'll be like 300,000 people or something ridiculous in Las Vegas for the hardware. So software comes too. And like they'll have ridiculous suites of, or they used to, I don't know what it will be like now, but they would have like ridiculous suites. And well, maybe they had not like that was maybe the last conference. I don't know. I have to look it up. But like ridiculous suites of like fabulous hors d'oeuvres and like spirits and like shows even and chefs like cooking stuff up or whatever. Like all to get you to talk to them about doing like business and other stuff with them from all sorts of different technology companies. And they'd have all like lots of people there. So that is like far more just like an industry style of thing. Or when you go to like an real industry oriented conference because it's in some kind of inaccessible place to the vast majority of people. It'll be like way more focused on, you know, everybody here is trying to do business with the next person and they like want to know why you're here and what you want. Like that can be tremendously productive because you get a chance to do all of these meetings and have just a tremendously filled schedule of people that you want to meet in person and interact with. However, it's also incredibly useful to go to like a conference that just has a broad like category of people. Like the Bitcoin conference that I went to in Miami that may be like, I don't know whether the people are going to continue to have conferences or not. But there was just a wide variety of people from all sorts of blockchains were either there or like CES, they had adjacent kind of events if they were like not watching Bitcoin but having their own thing. I'll put it that way. Because there are like Bitcoin maximalists that like only believe in Bitcoin, and so most of the time people don't come in there like, oh, I'm from this other blockchain. Like that tends to be frowned upon. So they'll have like outside conferences and outside stuff because all these people are there. And I think they said there was like 12,000 people. So there was like this ridiculous line on the first day and everything. So there may have been like sometimes people exaggerate, but there were a lot of people. So there was a wide variety of, you know, people just across the board from people that you would want to meet and interact with from like a business perspective. But then there were also people who were just users, which is also going back to what I was talking about when you're trying to segment what you're doing and thinking about things. When you're dealing with and interacting with users, you don't often get a chance to interact with people who are just like, I'm a member of this cooperative on this Bitcoin blockchain, and this is what I do. And I love Bitcoin because of the freedom I feel it provides me. And so this is the value that I have, and this is the value that I get out of it. This is the value that I get out of companies that do stuff that promote Bitcoin, for instance. And so you get a chance to see that, like, if you're, again, like you're thinking about from like more of like a marketing perspective, that you as a business may be dealing with businesses, but then there are consumers that interact with your products either directly or indirectly. And here's this opportunity that you may not get otherwise. And it may only be through email. It may only be through a phone call, but you have to just talk with them and like, you know, why are you here? Oh, it's because, you know, I got into Bitcoin in, you know, 2015 or 2016 or 2017 or just now, and I'm trying to learn more. And I love it because I love the community that's involved. I love like, I keep trying to like buy more Bitcoin, and I'm like charting like ATMs that appear as like, and then like I tell my family and friends, you know, I give them like fractional pieces of Bitcoin to like so that they are trying to like, be involved in it. And I try to set up, wallets for them. And I'm like going to like eventually run my own, like, it's this amazing thing because you think about like, again, thinking about the future, which I kind of try to do a lot, like just sit back and like think about how things will be. It gives you insight into how things may not be distributed yet and how people are going to want things to be kind of in the future and how they're going to think about things in the future, at least some fraction of the population is. And so like when you think about it with Bitcoin and crypto, well, these people, some of them are thinking about, well, in 2012 or 2013, there were like 100 people in the room or 200 people in the room, and everyone thought we were crazy. And now there's like 12,000 people, and Bloomberg is coming to cover this, and Bloomberg is interviewing people, and you see the price of Bitcoin on Bloomberg. You see Bitcoin articles in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times, in all of these papers of record across the globe, right? Like in The Economist, whatever, like people always need to mention The Economist so like you're of a certain intelligence level or something else like that. But I don't mean it. It's one of those things. It's like, mention The Economist. It's like when they ask people, it's like, what things do you read? Oh, I read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, The Economist, The Atlantic, right? Like all of these things. But yeah, so like those people, they've been along to see all those things. And so if you get the chance to interact with people like that, again, it's like I was saying, interacting with Stephen, there's a wealth of information that you learn about just not only from a firsthand perspective of seeing like this cycle of technology and how things that didn't work at one point may work in the future, but the idea itself isn't new. It's just the time is new. The technology, the enabling technology is different, is new. The way people are willing to think about it is different. Other technologies have enabled people to think about it in a different way. Like with Uber smartphones, that like, is Uber really possible without a smartphone? Probably not, like if we're using like a rotary phone to call into some weird, like probably not even possible. But so you have people that are able to talk about the different trends that they see. That's fascinating and incredibly useful and can inform a lot about a lot of the questions that we've talked about in terms of like bringing your product to market and like a go-to-market strategy, even dealing with yourself as a CEO and organizing stuff and thinking about how these things out there are moving forward. So going to a conference like that is incredibly useful because you get to talk to those people in person in a way that you wouldn't necessarily get to talk to otherwise. And also it's like when meetups come back, I think it's the same thing. You get to talk about people with real problems and real interests, using different technologies in different ways you may have never thought about because you're just head down dealing with a different set of problems. So it's useful. I find both of those things kind of to be useful things. One, like pure instant ROI. Others are like this kind of thought experiment, expanding your ability to think about your own thought experiments and developing like the sense of like awareness and empathy that you have for other people and their own journey and using, technology or any other product that they may be going through and using. That's incredibly vital.
So the last question I have for you is regarding all these ways that you've just expand your mind. Do you have specific rituals or habits that you haven't already mentioned that you do either on a like daily, weekly, monthly, or annual basis that keeps you accountable to always, be pushing your boundaries and discovering these new things that you didn't otherwise know?
That's really hard. I mean, I think that like for me, well, it starts back in when I learned to read. Actually, it does, but that would be a funny story if I could do something like that. But basically, I'm one of those kids who I learned to read kind of early. So I've always been like at home reading, whether that's reading, books, reading articles in newspapers or magazines, or, on the internet or on my phone or listening to podcasts or whatever, just in general, liking to consume different things that are out there, a variety of stuff. And so I feel like that's something that quest of trying to figure out what things are to an appropriate level is important. I'd stress the important piece of that in a way is that black box of to a level that is useful for you to understand in the current tasks that you're trying to accomplish. Because what can happen is with many people, they're like, I need to drive a car. Oh, I need to understand thermodynamics of, no, you don't. Right? And I tell this to people all the time. It's you're used to a car. You don't worry about how that engine works. You don't worry about, how the engine, the thermodynamic cycles in that engine. You don't worry about that. You don't worry about the electric motor and maybe the comparison between that and the gas car. You don't worry about any of that stuff. You just get in it and use it. So if I give you a new smartphone, do you need to think about all of the things that made that possible, or you even think as a tool that allows you to do new things and make your life useful in a way? So I think while you're approaching these things and trying to learn, it's you got to keep that in mind, that for me, I'm only trying to learn so much about something in order to accomplish whatever drew me to that there. I'm trying to improve this marketing skills in my CEO framework of stuff. So I'm reading this book, but I'm only going to do that to a certain level to solve these sorts of issues that I had. And that's kind of how I try to hold myself accountable in that way. Another way is, as I said, we have weekly reports that I didn't really understand at first, because I was oh, this is there's Office Space with the TPS reports, which I should know what they actually were, but I felt oh, this is just something I have to do and it's annoying. But over time, what I realized is it's a way of holding yourself accountable to what you accomplished during the week and what you want to accomplish in the next week. And then as you think about that, you can kind of hold yourself accountable. These are the things that I were able to accomplish. These are the things that I'm going to be able to go next week. And then you can go back to your notes that you're keeping, in whatever ways, either on your phone, on a notepad, on your computer, or whatever else. People have their own systems, and you can go back and cross-reference. Here's maybe what I learned from this interaction with this company or working on this product or doing this, whatever. Here's how I can put this back together. Here's how I can handle these things. And it kind of all flows together in a way that you keep yourself accountable and are constantly kind of upgrading your skills and what you're doing. So that's kind of one way when it comes to the business aspects of things. Then the other thing that I would look at is just as an individual, as a person, it's striving to be better in terms of being more empathetic, figuring out how to treat people and animals better. I have a cat who the cat chose me. It appeared and I was feeding it. And then I was the cat trained me to help the cat take care of itself, but he basically does what he wants inside rather than outside now. And now there's actually another cat that looks just like him that's outside that I'm trying to feed. He's not coming inside, but I need to take to the vet. But it's things like that. We have this amazing opportunity to do all these things. And you can't look at maybe comparing yourself kind of to other people. It's just comparing yourself to your growth, your pathway, what you're going to try to accomplish at this point. And the way to start doing that is by, coming out with goals, telling other people goals, writing down how you accomplish those things, and move toward those things. And it may be that things don't happen, at first, whether it's business, personal life, other stuff. But I think what you find is gradually by trying to write things down and hold yourself accountable and, think about these visions for the future and then bring them back to incremental steps, that all these things kind of flow together where you can improve in ways you know you need to make these things possible by keeping yourself accountable with your notes and the things you don't understand what somebody said, and reading them and looking at them, and gradually it gets better and better and better. And that's how I've grown over time. And I wish that would have been way easier, to pick that up, like going through like elementary school or, junior high or high school or college even, to like be able to look at that approach. But I think, the thing that's wonderful is that we have all these tools and technologies today, and it's a wonderful time. All this stuff is available, and we all we can look at the next thing that we can do is kind of try to do things in this next moment and pull together those series of next moments to work on things and do things. So that's how I look at it. It's like there's all of these things to do, and then outside of that, there's just all this wonderful stuff that's available, even when we're kind of constrained by COVID. It in a way, it makes us like, I think, feel, for me at least, that I took all of these things that I could do, out in the world for granted, and how like amazing even the things that we can do now are just like to take advantage of them. So that's kind of how I look at things, both from like a business perspective and trying to accomplish things and trying to do things, and then from a greater personal perspective of just trying to be like mindful and being like grateful of the things that you can be able to do.
Very neat perspective. I'm very thankful for all that you've shared with me this past hour, and I just want to give you an opportunity, just in case any of our viewers wants to follow you along in your journey, or follow you along in your company's journey. What's the best place for them to do so? I would say LinkedIn. So like link up with me on LinkedIn, and the easiest way to actually get there is to either go to my website, which is Jon L. Woodard, JONLWOODARD.com, or to Twitter, which is Jon Woodard without the L. Go there, and then you'll kind of see everything else. And if you're interested, just contact me, message me. I always say that because, again, very rarely do people take advantage of the opportunities that are given to them. So I say freely, if anyone wants to message me on any of those platforms, or, send me an email. I don't expect to be inundated. But that's the thing. Like, I would say again that, there's so many things out there to take advantage of, so many things to learn, so many interesting people. It's just great, to go out and do things and enjoy the experience of what you can do. And I will say with that, like, we do have these fabulous NFTs coming out. Like, we've already done them. If you follow me on Twitter, you can learn more about them, but they're available on liveminting.com, which is this new great NFT thing that we're working on, which we're also hiring for as well. So it's pretty amazing stuff. And like I said, like, the more you do things, the more you try to take advantage of everything that's out there and the new experiences that you have. Thank you so much for having me on, David. And thank you, for the conversation that you had earlier with me, where you taught me a lot of information, a lot of useful stuff. And, there's an example of taking advantage of opportunities that people present. So thanks. Thanks again for being on the show, and I thank you for the optimism you always share with me.
Thanks.